I still remember the moment the whole thing shifted for me, when the air inside O'Hare felt like it stopped moving, and every eye turned toward me. And it wasn't because I had done anything wrong, it was because a rookie cop decided he knew exactly who I was before I even opened my mouth. It started with a single sharp command that cut right through the quiet of the VIP boarding lane ID and boarding pass, he said, voice clipped, chest puffed out like he'd been waiting his whole life to say it to someone. And just like that, every head turned, strangers froze. The atmosphere tightened around me in this strange pressure cooker way, and I felt that old familiar weight settle on my shoulders, the one I learned to carry years ago when people decided things about me without giving me a second glance. I had just finished 3 long days at a civil rights conference in D.C. I was exhausted. My eyes burned from late-night panels and early morning flights, and all I wanted was to get home and sleep in my own bed. But this kid, this rookie named Ethan Hayes, stepped in front of me like he was guarding the gates of heaven, and something in his eyes told me he had already made up his mind about me before I said a word. I kept my tone even the way you do when you've had to learn how to protect your dignity in rooms that weren't built with you in mind, and I told him I had already scanned in with the attendant. He didn't care. His jaw tightened. He repeated himself like he was reading off a script. Step aside. Now. You know that feeling when you can see a bad situation forming in slow motion and you're screaming internally, this doesn't need to go this way, but the other person is pushing forward anyway, like they want to prove something to an invisible audience. Yeah, that was him. He paced like he had adrenaline leaking out of his ears, and I could tell he wasn't seeing me, not really, just whatever stereotype he'd learned to fear or mistrust. I asked him calmly, on what basis, and that simple question rattled him so fast, his voice cracked when he tried to justify himself with random screening, which wasn't true, not at that checkpoint, and he knew I knew it. People started watching, some leaning in, some raising their phones, not recording yet, but close waiting for whatever this rookie wanted to turn into. I stepped aside slowly, deliberately, because I wasn't going to look scared or guilty for something I hadn't done, and the moment I put my bag down, he lunged for it like it was contraband. I said, "Sir, that is unlawful," but he was already unzipping it with these fast, careless movements, knocking my things around, digging through my belongings with this invasive energy that made my stomach twist. And then he froze because he found it. The DOJ report. A thick binder stamped internal use only about nationwide police misconduct patterns that I was transporting back to Washington with full authorization. His eyes lit up like he'd cracked open some grand conspiracy. "What's this classified information, you leaking this?" His voice was loud enough that people actually gasped like he had caught me passing nuclear codes on the runway. It would have been laughable if it hadn't been terrifying. I told him steady as ever. "That belongs to the Department of Justice. Put it back." But he doubled down, waving it slightly like he wanted everyone to see it, feeding off the attention or maybe feeding off his own fear. He called for backup. 2 officers rushed over, hands hovering near their belts, eyes already treating me like a threat. Phones went up. A journalist, Marcus Reed, started recording, and he held that phone high and steady like someone who'd seen enough to know where this was going. Then the rookie hit me with it. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." My heart dropped, my fingers went cold, but my voice stayed unwavering. "You have no grounds to detain me," I said. But he grabbed my arms anyway, yanked them up too forcefully, and I felt that sharp burn as the cuffs cut my skin. A thin line of blood slid down my wrist, and I winced, not from fear, but from the shock. The disbelief that after all these years fighting for civil rights here, I was being treated like this in front of a crowd of strangers. And when I finally whispered, "I'm a DOJ attorney," he hesitated for a fraction of a second, but he didn't stop. He kept going because he had gone too far to pull back. They escorted me past the stunned crowd, past the monitors, past the people whispering in disbelief. I missed my flight. They sat me in a metal chair for 2 hours. 2 hours with my wrist bleeding, my dignity fraying, and my patience being tested in ways I thought I'd grown past. When they finally stepped out for a moment, I found a pen on the table. I steadied my hand, ignoring the trembling, and started writing everything down. Every quote, every expression, every violation. I wrote because I knew I wasn't going to let this disappear into the quiet the way so many things had been forced to for so many years. When I finally lifted my badge in that holding room, when I held it up with that injured wrist, the room went absolutely still. The supervising officer, Ramirez, walked in and stopped mid-step, eyes widening as he took in the DOJ emblem. The chain of authority flipped instantly. Suddenly, the room didn't run through the rookie. It ran through the law. And he knew it. His face went pale like he'd been unplugged from his own certainty. Ramirez ordered all body cam footage preserved. He collected the rookie's camera himself. When the door closed and it was just me and Ethan for a breath, he whispered, "I didn't know. You didn't look." And he couldn't finish the sentence because he could hear what it meant. I looked right at him and said I didn't look like I belonged. Say it. But he couldn't. His own truth sat heavy in the air, heavier than any accusation he'd thrown at me earlier. And it stuck with him. You could see it the way someone realizes the harm wasn't in the mistake, but in the belief that shaped it. I left that airport with a wound on my wrist and a fire in my chest. By the time I got home, the video Marcus recorded had already gone viral. 10 million views by morning, 20 by afternoon. Protests outside the terminal. Commentators breaking down every frame. The city had no choice but to open an investigation. And the deeper they looked, the more they found, because the rookie had a pattern. Not violence, not overt aggression, but a very consistent habit of stopping people who didn't look like they belonged. And suddenly the entire department had to answer for the culture that shaped him. I sat with my attorney friend Laura at my kitchen table, flipping through that DOJ report that ironically was the same one he accused me of leaking. I built timelines, preserved evidence, collected messages, pulled my journal off the shelf, the one where I had written about my childhood in Chicago, all the little things I had buried over the years, all the quiet moments when the world tapped me on the shoulder and reminded me I was viewed differently. I didn't want to revisit those memories, but I knew the case needed the full truth, not just the legal facts. When the suspension came for Ethan, he fell apart. When the lawsuit hit, $15 million, his world cracked open, his marriage collapsed, his career evaporated. He finally saw the man in the videos and didn't recognize himself, which somehow made the whole thing even more tragic, because that's the story for so many people who think their intentions are enough to erase their impact. When the trial started, it felt like stepping into the center of a storm. The gallery was full. Cameras waited outside. The jury watched my every move. Marcus took the stand first, playing the footage for the court. Some jurors leaned back like the force of it pushed them. Ramirez testified next, laying out protocol and where the rookie had blown past every line. And then I took the stand. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I told the truth. I talked about the conference, the fatigue, the humiliation, the injury. But then Laura handed me my journal, and I read pieces of my own history, handwritten entries about the moments that shaped how I stood in that airport line. The jurors didn't just hear about the incident, they heard about the lifetime behind it. They heard the emotional cost that accumulates when you're repeatedly told you're a problem before you're a person. When Ethan testified, he started calm, but his voice broke when Laura asked why he stopped me, and all he said barely above a whisper was, "She didn't look like she belonged." And the silence after that, it wasn't anger, it was clarity. The truth laid bare in the simplest, most painful words. The verdict came fast. Guilty. All counts. Full damages. $15 million. The courtroom buzzed. Reporters rushed out, phones lit up, and I just sat there quietly, hands folded over my journal, letting it wash over me like a slow tide. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just settles into place. People ask if I felt victorious. The truth is, victory wasn't the point. Accountability was. Change was. Making sure that moment didn't fade like so many others. And in the months that followed, reforms happened, trainings shifted, policies tightened. My story became part of something larger. I spoke at conferences, testified before committees. My journal was published because people wanted to understand the emotional truth behind the legal case. Letters came in from young women who said they finally felt seen. And the rookie Ethan, he tried to rebuild. He joined a bias reform program. He spoke in community centers. He didn't ask for sympathy, didn't seek forgiveness, just tried to understand himself better piece by piece. One day during a national conference, I saw him in the back of the room. He didn't approach me. He didn't even raise his eyes long. But in that split second when we recognized each other, I felt something I didn't expect. Not forgiveness, not anger, just the complicated truth that accountability and redemption can exist in the same story, even if they don't walk hand in hand. And sometimes I wonder, sitting alone at night with my journal, whether justice is enough or whether true change needs something messier, something harder, something more human. I don't know. Maybe we're all figuring that out together. So let me ask you, if you lived through something like this, would you forgive the person who wronged you, or is accountability where it ends for you? Tell me in the comments. I really want to hear your thoughts. And if this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today.